Trapped in the swamp. Inspired by a true story, Blackwater turns a simple adventure into a desperate fight for survival. Grace, her husband Adam, and Grace's younger sister Lee decide to take a boat trip through the mangroves in northern Australia with a tour guide named Jim. The day starts calm, the sound of insects and water creates a false sense of peace, until the silence breaks. A sudden attack flips the boat, throwing everyone into the water. What looked like a shadow turns into a nightmare, a massive crocodile. Jim is dragged under first, disappearing within seconds, and panic takes over. Grace, Adam, and Lee climb up the trees, trying to escape the predator circling slowly below, waiting. When Adam decides to try reaching the boat alone for help, the crocodile returns and pulls him to his death. Only the sisters remain, so they make one last attempt to reach the boat. Covered in blood and exhausted, Grace fights to survive, but her injuries are too severe. Alone and devastated, Lee is forced to face the crocodile. She finds a gun on the boat and, trembling with fear and rage, fires at the predator's head, killing it. The swamp finally falls silent. When Lee returns to her sister, it's too late. Grace has died, taking with her not only her life, but also the secret of a pregnancy that would never be revealed. Lee places her sister's body on the boat and rows away alone. Nica's possession. The terror begins on a fateful day in Curse of Chucky, when Nica Pierce, a young paraplegic woman, receives a mysterious package at home, a red-haired male doll wearing blue overalls and a frozen smile. At first it seems like an innocent gift, but that same night Nica finds her mother dead, the scene staged as a suicide. Days later, when the family gathers for the funeral, the massacre continues. One by one, her relatives are brutally murdered. Her sister Barb, brother-in-law Ian, babysitter Jill, all of it caused by Chucky, the killer doll, using his old trick, twisting the facts until the truth looks impossible. Nica tries to warn the police, but no one believes her. All the evidence points to Nica, so even though she's innocent, she's convicted and spends the next years in a high-security psychiatric hospital, trapped in a wheelchair and in a story no one believes. But Chucky never forgets his victims. He collects them. 4 years later, in Cult of Chucky, the doll returns, multiplied and crueler than ever. Dr. Foley, a manipulative doctor, convinces Nica that she committed the murders herself and that Chucky was never real. She begins to believe her own guilt until bodies start dropping again. When everything seems over, Chucky punishes her in the cruelest way. He possesses her body, transferring his soul into her. For the first time in her life, Nica can walk, but not by her own will. She becomes the killer's own weapon, fully aware but powerless, trapped inside her own body. Nica crushes Dr. Foley's head with her high heels, then escapes the hospital alongside Tiffany Valentine, Chucky's bride. But what comes next is even more twisted. In Chucky, the series, Tiffany keeps Nica prisoner, afraid that Chucky might possess her again. To prevent that, she amputates Nica's arms and legs, leaving her alive but completely helpless, living in pure torment. Now, Nica survives, but without a body, without freedom, and with the killer himself sharing space inside her mind. The Last Ride. Wendy Christensen thought it would just be a fun night, a roller coaster ride with friends. But what started with laughter quickly turned into a horrifying vision. In seconds, the metal track becomes a road to death. Wendy sees each of her friends die tragically. The cars derail, bodies fly, and her scream echoes. When she snaps out of the trance, she realizes it was a premonition, and fate is about to repeat itself. She begs everyone to get off the ride, causing chaos that saves a few, but not for long. Death has a plan, and in Final Destination 3, one by one, everyone starts dying in bizarre, brutal, and creative accidents. Wendy and her friend Kevin discover that the photos taken at the park contain clues about each death. They try to stop it, to decode the signs, to change the outcome. But in Final Destination, changing fate only delays it. 5 months later, Wendy believes she's finally free. She's on a subway with her friend Laura and Sean heading home. Everything seems calm until that same familiar feeling returns. She's about to get off the train when she runs into her younger sister Julie, and moments later, they realize Kevin is in the same car. Something terrible is coming. At the end of the movie, Wendy has another vision. Everyone on the train dies. But unlike the roller coaster, this time it's too late. The train is already moving and there's nothing left to do but wait for death.
We gotta get out! It's not working!
The final trap. What started as an elegant dinner ended in a massacre. Among the guests is Erin Harson, girlfriend of Crispian. Suddenly, the windows shatter and arrows fly through the air, killing one of the guests. Erin is the first to react. The intruders wear animal masks and carry sharp weapons. One by one, family members fall victim to carefully planned attacks. But Erin isn't an ordinary woman. Raised until she was 15 in a survivalist camp with her father, she turns fear into instinct. She builds deadly traps, improvises weapons, and fights with a cold precision that shocks even the killers. The cruelest twist comes when the truth is revealed. Crispian Crispian, the man she loved, is behind it all. He and his brother Felix hired the killers to murder their own family and inherit the fortune. Crispian confesses that Erin was never supposed to be harmed. She was meant to be the neutral witness, unconnected to the family. In the final confrontation, Erin is forced to kill Crispian, stabbing the man she loved. When the police finally arrive, Officer Trubiano sees Erin killing Crispian and immediately shoots her in the shoulder, thinking she's the killer. Erin desperately tries to warn him about the traps she set around the house, but he ignores her screams. As he steps through the front door, the axe trap triggers, and the cop dies instantly. The movie ends with Erin wounded and alone among the bodies. She's the only survivor, but also the main suspect in a massacre she didn't commit. The Eternal Survivor. Haddonfield, Illinois, a small, quiet town until one Halloween night when evil comes home. There we meet Laurie Strode, a regular, responsible teenager, the kind who babysits neighborhood kids. But on October 31st, 1978, she learns that true terror can be right across the street. A masked man watches her silently from afar. He's Michael Myers, the killer who murdered his own sister at 6 years old and escaped the asylum after 15 years locked up. Now he's chosen Laurie as his next target. She faces the unthinkable. Armed only with scissors, hangers, and courage, she fights for her life and survives. But in Halloween, surviving doesn't mean winning. The trauma follows Laurie for decades. 40 years later, she's consumed by paranoia, turning her home into a fortress, sleeping with guns nearby, and reliving the sound of his footsteps every Halloween. Her marriage ends. Her daughter Karen grows up traumatized, and her granddaughter Allison barely knows her. But when Michael escapes again, Laurie is ready. She traps him in her house and sets it ablaze with him inside. But evil doesn't die easily. In Halloween Kills, Michael survives and slaughters everyone who tries to stop him. The town descends into chaos. Karen, Laurie's daughter, faces Michael alone and dies right in front of Allison. In Halloween Ends, 4 years later, Laurie finally tries to live again. But when Michael returns one last time, the final battle begins. Laurie defeats him, and his body is shredded in a junkyard as all of Haddonfield watches. She stares at him until the very end, making sure evil truly dies. Before we talk about the next final girl, don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying what we do here, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, what's coming next gets even crazier. Paradise Lost. Jenny Greengrass and her boyfriend Steve Taylor head off for a quiet weekend at Eden Lake, a secluded lake surrounded by forest in the English countryside. The plan is simple: camp, swim, and relax far from the city. But what starts as a romantic getaway soon turns into a nightmare with no escape. Everything changes when a group of teenagers shows up. Teasing, laughter, and minor aggression build the tension until one small incident becomes the spark. The group, led by a psychotic boy named Brett, steals the couple's car, and what seemed like a prank turns into the start of a brutal hunt. The teens aren't playing around. They capture, torture, and kill Steve, recording everything on their phones as trophies of cruelty. Injured, covered in blood, and in despair, Jenny hides among the trees and finally escapes the forest. She stumbles onto a road, begging for help. A man stops and takes her to a nearby house where she believes she's safe. But the horror of Eden Lake isn't over. Inside the house, she recognizes the faces in the photos. They're the parents of the boys who hunted her. Before she can react, the adults don't panic. They decide to protect their sons. Upstairs, Brett listens to Jenny's muffled screams as she's murdered in the shower. He deletes the evidence from their phones, puts on Steve's stolen Ray-Bans, and stares at his reflection, empty, indifferent, as if nothing happened. Brett's father promises to keep the town quiet when the police arrive. The movie ends there in the silence of the house. The music plays, the conversations continue, and Jenny is never seen again. Anna's martyrdom. As a child, Lucy Jurin survived the unthinkable. She escaped from a slaughterhouse, covered in wounds, screaming for help. But what she ran from that night in 1971 never left her. Placed in an orphanage, Lucy meets Anna Asawi, a kind girl who becomes her only friend. But Lucy is haunted by visions of a disfigured creature, a physical manifestation of her trauma that attacks her again and again. Anna cares for her, protects her, tries to save her, but some horrors can't be healed with love. 15 years later, Lucy believes she's found her a seemingly ordinary family, the Belfons. Revenge comes quickly, and she slaughters them all. Anna arrives soon after, trying to help her friend, but the massacre only opens the door to something far worse. Lucy, broken by guilt and the trauma that never left her, takes her life. She dies in Anna's arms. Alone and desperate, Anna discovers a hidden passage in the house. Down below, she finds another victim, a chained woman, and then the cult appears. Anna learns that Lucy's trauma had a real source, a secret cult devoted to an unspeakable goal: to create martyrs. For them, extreme pain is the only path to understanding what lies beyond death. And to reach that truth, they must turn someone into a pure being through absolute suffering. Anna becomes their next experiment. Day after day, starvation, beatings, silence, everything is calculated to break her spirit. But Anna doesn't scream. She endures until the final limit is crossed. Her skin is flaking while she remains conscious, staring blankly into nothing. After pushing her beyond all limits, the cult believes they've succeeded. They have a witness from the afterlife. In her final moments, Anna whispers something to Mademoiselle, the cult's leader. Something so devastating that the woman goes upstairs, gathers the cult members, and kills immediately after. But before that, yet when someone asks what Anna said, Mademoiselle replies, "Keep doubting." But what Anna saw, no one will ever know. The film ends in silence, with Anna lying still, staring into nothing. The saddest part is knowing she only went there to help her friend, and ended up suffering it all herself. Calvin, the alien. In the near future, the International Space Station becomes the stage for one of humanity's greatest discoveries, alien life. They name it Calvin, a microscopic organism that grows at an alarming rate. At first, it's fascinating, but soon the station turns into a nightmare. Calvin learns, adapts, and kills. The crew is hunted down one by one with no chance to escape. Scientist Hugh Derry is crushed to death by the creature. Commander Katerina dies frozen in space. Pilot Rory is devoured from the inside out. Only two remain, Dr. David Jordan and Dr. Miranda North. Miranda tries to contain the creature, planning to use 2 escape pods. The plan is simple. David must lure Calvin into his pod and send himself into deep space, while Miranda returns to Earth to warn humanity. David accepts the sacrifice. Both pods are launched at the same time, one with Calvin and David, the other with Miranda. The mission is clear. David must be lost to the void while Miranda saves Earth. But fate is cruel. During separation, Miranda's capsule is hit by debris, damaging its navigation system. Inside the other pod, Calvin uses its strength to force David off course, steering the capsule toward Earth. Miranda's pod drifts into endless space, and David's is the one that lands on Earth. The capsule crashes into the South Pacific Ocean. Fishermen approach, thinking they're rescuing an astronaut. David, wrapped in a strange substance, screams desperately for them not to open it. But when they unlock the hatch, the horror awakens again. Calvin is alive. The camera cuts to space. Miranda's module floats aimlessly through the darkness. The descent into hell. It all starts as a girl's adventure. 6 women decide to explore an uncharted cave system in the Appalachian Mountains. Among them is Sarah Carter, still shattered by the loss of her husband and young daughter in a car accident months earlier. What was supposed to be a bonding trip becomes a journey to hell. When one of the tunnels collapses, the group realizes they're completely trapped underground. No map, no exit, and the air running out. Total darkness surrounds them, and in the midst of that oppressive silence, something moves. The creatures known as crawlers, blind, fast, humanoid, and carnivorous, emerge from the shadows. What follows is a massacre. One by one, the women are slaughtered. In the chaos, Sarah discovers that Juno, one of her closest friends, had an affair with her husband before the accident. Enraged, Sarah leaves Juno wounded and at the mercy of the monsters. Covered in blood and driven mad by fear, Sarah fights to survive. She kills, screams, crawls, and escapes that underground hell. But then comes the plot twist. Sarah never escaped. Everything she saw was a hallucination. In the end, she's still in the cave, surrounded by the crawlers. Mia's rebirth? 5 friends travel to a remote cabin in the woods. But this isn't a fun trip, it's an intervention. Mia Allen, a former heroin addict, is trying to finally quit after a near-fatal overdose a year earlier. Soon after arriving, a foul smell fills the air. In the cellar, the group finds dead animals and a book wrapped in barbed wire and human skin. The Natrum de Monto, the Book of the Dead. Despite the warnings written in its own pages, Eric reads it out loud. The words are spoken, and something ancient awakens. Evil spreads through the cabin walls and Evil Dead. It rains blood. Screams echo, and terror takes form inside Mia's body. Possessed, she twists, vomits blood, and spits blasphemies no human could utter. One by one, her friends fall to the entity. Olivia is possessed and attacks the group. Natalie her own arm after being infected. Eric dies, and the cabin becomes an altar of pain and despair. David, Mia's brother, manages to save her by burying her alive until the possession breaks, but the cost is devastating. To save his sister, David burns the cabin down with himself and the possessed corpses inside, sacrificing his life so Mia can live. But the nightmare isn't over. From the blood-soaked forest, the abomination rises, a demonic being born from the deaths of the 5. Alone and exhausted, Mia is forced to face the creature. But first, she faces one brutal challenge. In one of the most shocking scenes of the decade, she saw her own arm trapped under the car to free herself, then grabs a chainsaw and slices the monster in half as the sky rains fire and blood. With one final strike, Mia destroys the abomination. When it's all over, the rain of blood stops, the sun rises, and Mia walks through the forest. She survived, but the scars of possession will never truly fade. The loop of guilt. Jess just wanted a day to relax. Tired, drained, and emotionally unstable, she accepts her friend Greg's invitation to go sailing with a group of friends. But what seems like a calm day at sea quickly turns into a nightmare and an endless curse. During the trip, a storm hits the yacht and leaves them stranded. The waves swallow everything, and the silence that follows is broken only by a distant sound, the engine of an approaching cruise ship. The group climbs aboard, believing they have been saved, but the ship, the Aeolus, is empty, or so it seems. Jess starts feeling that something's wrong. There are bloodstains, echoes in the hallways, and most disturbing disturbing of all, her own belongings scattered everywhere. When her friends start dying one by one, Jess discovers the truth. There's another version of her on the ship, and she's the killer. Trapped in an endless time loop, different versions of Jess meet, fight, and replace each other. Every cycle ends the same way, with her being thrown overboard and waking up believing she's finally free. But freedom is a cruel illusion. When she returns home in Triangle, Jess finds a version of herself beating her son, Tommy. Horrified, she kills her double and hides the body in the trunk. She grabs Tommy and drives off, desperate to save him this time. But distracted by her son in the backseat, she crashes into a truck. The accident kills Tommy instantly. The dead Jess's body is thrown from the trunk, completing the perfect scene. Mother and son dead in the crash. But this Jess survives unharmed. She steps out and watches the scene from the road. A taxi driver appears, the same one as before, offering her a ride. Jess accepts and he takes her to the harbor, and the cycle begins again. The ship's name, Aeolus, the Greek god of the winds, is a metaphor for the eternal punishment of Sisyphus, who was condemned to roll a boulder uphill only to see it fall back every time. Jess, like him, is punished for cheating death. Her soul is trapped between guilt and regret, endlessly trying to save a son who can no longer be saved. On screen, there's a video showing the dumbest decisions ever made in horror movies. Click to watch. See you there.